Whether you're in therapy right now or looking for a therapist, here are some red flags and green flags to look out for in a therapist from a therapist. If you're new here, my name is Simone Saunders and I'm a licensed therapist and social worker in Calgary, Alberta. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get started. Red flag number 1, lack of boundaries. If you notice that your therapist is sharing a lot of personal details about themselves or sharing personal details about other clients, that is a massive red flag. Of course, there's always appropriate self-disclosure, and that might look different from therapist to therapist. But any self-disclosure from a therapist should be applicable to the situation and should never make you feel uncomfortable. Lack of boundaries could also include the relationship between you and your therapist. Any attempts to develop an outside friendship or romantic relationship with you is 100% a no-go. Red flag number 2, lack of respect for your time. Of course, things happen and sometimes sessions end late or end a little bit early depending on the session, but it's really important that your therapist is not consistently disrespecting your time. So if you're noticing that your therapist is consistently showing up late to your sessions or forgetting about your sessions, if you notice that your therapist is consistently ending your sessions way earlier than you're supposed to, that's something to really keep in mind. Red flag number 3, if you notice that your therapist is preoccupied in session. So this could be a physical preoccupation with their phone or something that they're doing with their hands, and this doesn't include taking notes about the session, but this could also look like a mental preoccupation. So are they paying attention to you? Do they seem like they're drifting off or in a way different headspace? Red flag number 4, invalidation and judgment. So your therapist is always someone who should give you unconditional positive regard. And what I mean by that is not that your therapist should always agree with you, but they should always be a welcoming, safe, and supportive environment. So if you ever feel like your therapist is judging you or invalidating your feelings, that's something to really be curious about. And when I say be curious about it, if you have the relationship, I would always recommend bringing it up and talking about it. If it doesn't feel like a safe space to bring those things up, then that's a different story. Red flag number 5, consistently forgetting details. Of course, there's part of us that might be understanding that this therapist might have a lot of clients, but it's also really important that you feel like you're not just another number on the list. Your therapist should be doing their due diligence in order to remember the things that you bring up in session, whether that be names of people, experiences that you've had. So if you notice that they're consistently forgetting details that are really important to you, that's something to really, really keep in mind. And red flag number 6 is diving into trauma too early. This is something really, really important to know. So if you go to therapy because of your trauma, of course you're going to want to work on it. But it's also really important to have a therapist that knows that diving into trauma too early without a safe relationship can be very, very damaging. So if you notice that the first session, your therapist is wanting to dive deep into things that are really, really vulnerable for you, that is a massive red flag. Your therapist should always be taking your direction around what you're comfortable with, especially in the beginning when there isn't that safety and relationship built yet. Now that we've talked about red flags, let's talk about green flags. So green flag number 1 is a therapist that asks for and accepts feedback. Because of the power dynamic that is inherent in a therapeutic relationship, it's so important to have a therapist that asks for your feedback, because it can be really uncomfortable to do so sometimes just on your own volition. When a safe space is created for feedback, it allows the therapeutic relationship to grow. Green flag number 2, a therapist that is validating and empathetic. Now remember, a therapist validating and agreeing with you doesn't necessarily mean that they won't call you in on some of the decisions that might not be helpful for your circumstances. It just means that regardless of the things that you do, you feel like you're not being judged, you feel like you're still being valued. Green flag number 3, they're able to understand their limits. And what I mean by that is that they're able to understand when you are out of their scope of care. This is something that is super important because there are unfortunately therapists that practice out of their scope. So if you're dealing with issues that they perhaps have never dealt with before or don't have the right training for, it's really important to have a therapist that is honest with you about that so that they can refer you to someone who can best suit your needs. Green flag number 4, able to gently hold you accountable. So this goes back to being validating and empathetic. It's important that your therapist is able to hold you accountable in a way that is gentle and non-judgmental. Honesty and cruelty are not synonymous, and it's really important that your therapist is able to call you in a way that is compassionate. And green flag number 5, the therapist views you as the expert on your own life. Now let me explain this. You are the only person that knows your life inside and out. You are the only person that has lived your life. And so it's really important to have a therapist that acknowledges that and validates that. When you have a therapist that views you as an expert on your own life, it goes from the therapist being in the driver's seat and you being in the passenger seat to you being in the driver's seat and the therapist being in the passenger seat. Of course, the therapist has specialized knowledge in which you're coming to them to learn, but the therapist is there to guide you along your journey, not drive the car for you. So your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences are your own, and nobody can take those things away from you. Your therapist is there to guide you through different experimentation processes of what works and what doesn't work. So whether you're in therapy right now or you're looking for a therapist, keep all of these red flags and green flags in mind. If you have other red flags and green flags that you have noticed in therapists, drop them in the comments. If you have any questions, drop that in the comments as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.